Welcome to the best of the Aotearoa Rugby Pod for this week. Now, one of the big talking points this week was Beauden Barrett. Obviously, that dot down where he stepped on the line costs the Blues a try against the Chiefs, and in the end, they couldn't win that game.
Yeah, well, when you wear the 10 jersey at All Black level, the pressure comes on and the expectation rises. So I think there's a few 10s across the country under that pressure.
And we got a question from Cal Dobby, one of our viewers, via email. He's asking about Beauden's form, and he wants to know whether or not he's going to miss out on the World Cup. And when you look at how well Damian McKenzie's going for the Chiefs and where Richie Mo'unga is, it's an interesting question. He's playing himself out of the World Cup, according to Cal Dobby, by exposing his flaws week in, week out. Is that a fair thing to say?
Oh, I think he would probably say himself that he's not in vintage form, but 114 tests, I think he's going to have to do a lot more wrong to play himself out of a World Cup squad. We know how good he is, but I think that competition's good. Like Damian McKenzie is staking his claim. Like everyone was sort of talking, is it Stephen Perifera or Damian McKenzie in that sort of 10-15 role? Well, the way he's playing, he'd be talking, opportunities to be wearing the 10 in the All Blacks. So I know Beauden will come right, but he will. The amount of work he puts in during the week, the hard work will pay off eventually. And I always think it's always hard on individuals. There were some individual errors, but it is a team sport, and you have to have a high-functioning set piece, you have to have a high-functioning breakdown. It is always going to be a challenge against teams like the Chiefs.
And the Blues did have high-functioning in the most part, which would suggest that Beauden Barrett did most of the things right outside of a couple of glaring mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. And there were obviously other players around that made mistakes, but people only, because Beauden is Beauden, people see and remember that. And whereas other players aren't as big names that potentially had higher error rates if you go through the team statistically.
Yeah, I'm keen to understand from you, Bryn, when we look at the number 10s at the moment, and obviously we're seeing the Chiefs unbeaten, we're seeing Damian McKenzie looking really, really strong, and we're seeing probably Richie and Beauden not quite at 100%. Is there a definite possibility that we could see D-Mac jump both of them and be the starting 10 at the World Cup, or do you feel like it's unlikely?
Well, I think that's pretty tough. I think, they're pretty low in and around having the two 10s, and I think Damian coming back, and which is fair enough. I think he's the form 10 and he's probably shown the best consistency with the Chiefs, and he's probably one of the reasons why they've gone undefeated. But I think, look, you've got two quality 10s that probably, probably aren't where they want to be. But it's a long competition. You've got to look at around the longevity of what it's going to look like in the finals, and even that's where we want them peaking. And so I guess for Damian, it's been ready to be able to get himself in that conversation to be able to start at 10, possibly like you're saying, Ross, or getting in the conversation to be that third 10, because I think the 10 role has to be able to cover 15, and all Damian can do is consistently play well at 10, and when he does get put to 15, when Bryn or Joshua come on, and be able to stake his claim that way. But I believe Jip. I think Richie and Beauden will come good, but then I think the more that Damian can play well, if there are injuries, we have seen in previous World Cups, Stephen Doddle not too long ago, that you are going to need that depth if there are injuries, and Damian's playing at a great level at the moment, so hopefully continue that for the rest of the year.
The one thing I love about big time players like Beauden Barrett and Richie Mo'unga, and I suppose if we use Carter and McCaw leading into the 2015 World Cup, is when the pressure goes on these individuals, they front up and they will 9 times out of 10 bring their very best out of themselves. So I'm excited to starting to see that transition into their world-class stuff, because they won't be going away without a fight.
Damian McKenzie, I suppose, as an option on the bench, is a very, very strong one, whether it's at 23 or 22. How do you feel they might use him?
I think he's probably gunning for 22
and
being that genuine 10-15. But, in terms of his versatility, he can play wing. He could definitely be a right winger. I don't think there's a hell of a lot of difference between 15 and that right wing spot. He's got enough pace. He's got great aerial skills. So he fits into both. It'll just be, maybe they want that 23 spot to cover a midfield. You do need that midfield cover. But then, if there's a Leicester starting, it really depends on who else is in form and what way they're going to go to see that balance, because we could come up with a number of different versions depending on who actually starts the game and how they need cover, what cover they need.
Bryn, you wouldn't think you necessarily need that much wing cover when you've got Rico at 13 and also, chances are you can have Geordie at 12, and both of them have been successful wingers at international level.
Yeah, it is, and I think it all depends around what they do with Beauden as well. Do they want to play him out as an out-and-out 10 or having him at that fullback role? If he's at fullback, then there's probably no need to have Damian in that 10-15 cover with Beauden being able to cover 10. But again, I just think there's so many ways of that 23 role, how they're going to do it. If Beauden isn't selected, then he's got on the bench. Then is it a conversation between Damian and Beauden Barrett because they both cover that 10-15 role on the bench. So there is a lot of flexibility around that. But I think it just all depends where they see that mix. Do they see Beauden as a 15 or just an out-and-out 10 going with Richie? Probably then opening up for Damian to have that kind of 10 and 15 role cover if that's selection.
Speaking of regions, the Blues, there's going to be a lot of chat about Leon McDonald next year, about whether he is with Scott Robertson within the All Blacks setup. And there are now rumours going around about who's going to replace him. Those rumours include Dave Rennie. There was an article by Liam Napier where he said that there's been an approach. Is he a good fit?
Well, I'm obviously part of his coaching staff, so, we've got that good connection there, heading back into the Blues. Look, I think he's a great fit anywhere. I am yet to hear a player talk, poorly about Dave Rennie. And even a lot of those senior Wallaby leaders, have a lot of respect, and they say a lot of, I suppose, glowing reports in terms of him as who he is as a person, but also the environments he creates. Probably the only one blemish with Vunivalu, I think, around training schedules and so forth, but I don't think that falls at the feet of just the head coach. So, look, it would be great. I'd be extremely excited as an ex-Blues player, but someone that really wants to see the Blues go well, and someone of his calibre going in there. He knows how to win Super Rugby titles, which is what everyone's trying to do in that building.
Obviously, Tom Coventry's a guy who's got a solid relationship too.
Well, and prior history. So, I think it would be exciting, but with all these rumours, I mean, it's never guaranteed. Sometimes when there's smoke, there is fire.
Do you see the smoke, Bryn?
I do see the smoke, but I think I've also heard that he might be coming over to Japan possibly as well. So, there's obviously a lot of rumours, and when there's a guy like that has that much experience, we've talked a lot around how great of a coach he is, and I think for him being at the Blues environment, I think Tom Coventry's there. He'd be great for that environment. But then in saying that as well, like you look at, I'm not too sure what Joe Smith's doing, Jip. I know that he's spent a bit of time with the Blues, and I think if Leon did go and Joe Smith didn't go into that All Blacks camp, then you'd have to think that he'd be a good candidate to be able to jump and slip in right there with the coaching staff that's there. But look, Dave Rennie's probably going to have a lot of opportunities, whether that's in Japan, different parts of Europe, or coming back home to New Zealand. I think anywhere that he does go, they're going to get a great candidate and a great coach moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you'd be silly not to have conversations with those people. But knowing Joe Schmidt, I suppose he's going to be all out focused on the preparations towards the World Cup, and then would probably look at having those discussions post that. Whether that's soon enough for Blues management, I'm not too sure. So you definitely hope he's been factored in somewhere, but I suppose he has sort of alluded to that maybe a head role like that isn't what he's after.
He has been within the Blues camp in the last couple of years. He has a solid understanding, but...
Oh, massive, and a hell of a lot of respect from the playing group and other coaches.
When he came back to New Zealand, he wasn't sounding like head coaching was necessarily something that was on his radar at all, was it?
No, but then, I don't know if the All Blacks role was either, so, time does change things.
Yeah.
Another guy that would be worthy of a conversation, that's for sure.
And what we do know is that Jip is going to want to be on that. He tried to get on the Wallabies team. The phone call didn't come.
It didn't come, and it's still not coming, I don't think, but
yeah,
I'll still be a fan of Dave Rennie.
And what role exactly are you after?
I'm not too sure. I don't think I'm a very good coach, so I'll put the cones out or something.
Yeah. Oh, you can be their official podcaster.
Yeah.
So let's move on. So the Crusaders once again get up with a team short of a lot of big-name All Blacks, including their captain, Sam Whitelock. How do they continue to do this? How do they continue to bring young players through up to Super Rugby level and they just perform. It's an interesting conversation that obviously you come through academies and you come through schools and you have, nutritionists and you have training and everything is laid out in front of you. To a degree as a rugby player, it's almost what comes on outside of life that you have to rely on to mature you because everything is set in stone everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, to a point, like there's obviously, you do want to try and avoid that learned helplessness, but the reality is, you're right, like sometimes you just need to know the schedule, you need to know what you're doing to get the very best out of you on the rugby field. But I totally agree. I think what you do away from the field is massive in your development as a person, but also as a rugby player.
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Go on.
Well, you know what it's
Yeah.
like. It's if you constantly get given a schedule and told where to be, what to wear, you almost then you come out the other side of your career, and then you don't have that. It's like you're setting people up to fail. So it's about trying to make sure that the environments, although they have to deliver, in terms of a slick system, it's not all just spoon-fed.
Yeah.
Make the players part of the conversation, make them part of organising it, and what they want to do, little committees here and there, so that it's actually player-driven, not just staff-driven.
I think sometimes as well, I think as young players coming through, you probably go from the schooling system and being able to be the big fish in a small pond. And that's the kind of situation you've been in for a lot of these young kids coming through the system. Sorry, not to say that Moni's doing that, but sometimes it just takes that ability to be able to be in a system for 3 to 4 years, learning the preparation side, the outside, like Jip, you were alluding to, and being able to then go from there and then get the confidence to then understand what you are as a rugby player. Like Sean Stevenson talked about it probably last year around, it took him a while to understand around what it was for him to be a rugby player and what makes him click to get the best out of him. And he's been here for 5 or 6 years before he actually figured that out. So sometimes players get it really, really quickly and are able to really adjust and being able to hit the ground running. But sometimes it takes a little bit longer to firstly maybe get an opportunity and then being able to play consistently and then be able to get your preparation or your outside rugby, getting that right and all that marrying up together. And then you've probably seen how Moni's going at the moment and playing really, really consistent. That probably just shows around some of those areas that we've touched on.
I remember talking to TJ Pettinato a couple of years ago about an injury that he had, and he talked about how he came out of the back of that injury and he had to think about what his identity was, because he had seen himself as a rugby player and only in a rugby player. And when he was out for that long, he had to see himself as something else. And then when he got back to rugby, he felt like he was a much more rounded rugby player because of the ability to see the rest of the world and not just that thing that was the goal from when he was this high.
Yeah, and I think as you get in sort of the latter parts of your career, when you have big injuries like that, it's when something as precious as living your dream gets taken away from you, you actually come back a better player because you don't take any day for granted, you don't take any training for granted, you don't take any game for granted, and it brings a better edge out of you as a player. But I also think it's massive in terms of that growth of you as an individual and making sure that you are more than just a rugby player, because every individual is.
Well, thank you very much once again for joining us on the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. We'll catch you again next week. We've got plenty to watch this weekend, if not as much as usual. Crusaders versus Moana Pacifica, Reds v Brumbies, Highlanders v Canes, Rebels v Blues. Catch all of that action on Sky Sport. You can catch all of the analysis on Sky and also on Rugby Pass if you want to get a hold of us. This is our email address, aotearoarugbypod@sky.co.nz. Also, if you want to come into the tipping league, go to Super Rugby Tipping, go to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod League, join us and see if you can knock us off our purchase. My purchase is very low.
I took a hit this week.
But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Chip, once again. We'll see you all next week with James Parsons, Bryn Hall and Ross Carl.